blushing. I'm embarrassed. It's not easy. Thank you, Ajay, for such a warm welcome. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back at PSU. This is where it all began for me, so it's awesome to be here, and it's great to see all of you. I want to share with you exciting trends, new developments in transportation and technology, and talk about what's happening in the world of mobility. And as I do, I want you to keep in mind that all of us have a responsibility to figure out what kind of city we want here in Portland, what kind of world of mobility we're striving for. And that's why today I want to share with you a pitch about building a mobility bill of rights. So, before I begin, let's take a little poll. Raise your hand if you got here on public transit. Seriously? That's fantastic. How many of you use the Hop card? How many use the TriMet Tickets app? Fantastic. We made 7 cents on each of you this morning. Thank you so much. How many of you took a car share vehicle, a BMW? How about a car to go? Okay. Who drove? Boo. No, it's fine. It's totally fine. No matter how you got here, whether you drove your own car, you rode public transit, you took a car share, a Lyft, an Uber, chances are you ran into congestion. You ran into traffic. And if you consider the fact that as we grow, more than 86% of the world's population will be clustered in cities, in urban centers, meaning getting from point A to point B is going to be tough. It's going to be really difficult. And it's going to take the time that's so precious that we all rely on. So what are we going to do about it? Well, that's where Movil enters the picture. We have a vision which is a planet without traffic jams. Can you imagine the idea that you could go to any city and get around anywhere without any problem? And our mission is to really transform cities by providing the most sustainable and convenient mobility solutions. So we're going to talk about what that looks like today. We have a fundamental belief that if we can connect you with the people and the destinations that matter most to you, we can improve quality of life in cities. We can actually make people happier. And it's really fundamental to say, how do we actually build the city that we want? But let's talk about where we came from. Some of you may have a lanyard that says Daimler on it. Movil, in fact, is wholly owned by Daimler, the inventor of the automobile. And the car itself, if you look at this picture of this Mercedes-Benz, it's truly fantastic. Cars opened freedom for us. The open road, the ability to go anywhere, anytime, when we wanted, to enjoy the wind in our hair, to get out there. But is it possible that perhaps we have actually organized our cities too fundamentally around the automobile? Have we lost an opportunity to have rich and vibrant city centers where people, bicycles, and shared transportation can be the priority versus single people in their own cars? And I don't mean single people like me. Thank you very much, Ajay Malhotra. So, while individual mobility has created enormous opportunity and convenience for us, we also know that there's been unintended consequence. All of us have spent countless hours, days even, stuck in traffic. We encounter pollution, noise pollution, air pollution. If you've ever been to any city outside the United States, this can be even more egregious. And we also are stuck with fatalities, people losing their lives in car accidents, and of course, all of the underutilized space in our cities that is currently devoted to parking. So let's put some numbers to that, some context. People in Mexico City spend more than a month every year in traffic. Can you imagine? Truly, a whole month of their lives every year stuck in traffic. Half of Americans live in cities where the air quality doesn't even meet the federal guidelines. 500,000 people a year die. They lose their lives in traffic accidents. And in Berlin alone, 64,000 playgrounds, 4 Central Parks worth of parking floods the city. So can we do better than that? That's really the question. We believe that today, urban mobility has to be reinvented, and we all have to focus on where we want to go. So let me introduce to you a few concepts that we think will drive this conversation. First, connectivity. Everyone has a smartphone. It's almost ubiquitous. Currently, 95% of Americans carry a smartphone connected, equipped device in their pockets. And this creates an amazing opportunity to receive real-time information about traffic, about options to get from point A to point B. Autonomous vehicle technology, brought to you by Daimler, brought to you by Ubers, by Waymos, is advancing rapidly. This is not science fiction. This is the real deal, and it's coming. And the notion that a car will drive itself or a bus will drive itself, in and of itself is cool, but think of the time you can recapture in your life if you don't have to focus on the road. Next is the notion that sharing vehicles, actually being able to use a car between multiple people, is quite radical. And if you look at an OEM like Daimler, the notion that people actually value access over ownership fundamentally challenges our core business model. And finally, let's hope that these vehicles themselves run on clean electricity, energy that is produced with renewables and that is completely clean in our cities. So, what does it look like? What does the city of the future truly look like with these concepts? Well, we believe that a city like this is actually a very clean city. This is in Germany, it's not in the United States. It's very clean, there's no graffiti. But the idea is we will have more space to utilize cities for general human purpose, for recreation, for leisure, for bringing together people and community. That we'll have accident-free shared mobility across multiple modes, not just cars, but public transit, bike share, car share, and the like. We'll have clean energy, as I said, and we'll also have the space to think about new, innovative, and efficient means of transportation. Maybe it's going to be robocopters. Maybe it'll be the transporter. Let's see. But how do we get there? Well, Movil is building technologies that are equipping cities and equipping public transit agencies with the notion of connected digital intelligence. How can we actually create mobility dashboards where a city and their planners can see where every vehicle is, where they can actually import data about weather, about traffic, about events and locations that will be parking constrained because there's a Blazers game, because there's a Tech Fest Northwest? And can we equip these cities with tools to dynamically manage supply and congestion? Can we include pricing that might actually increase the price, for example, of parking so as to drive people to take public transportation? Or can we push you a subsidy to take a car-to-go or a zip car when it counts most? So cities are one of our customers, but the rest are all of you. And we're building some of the most innovative mobility applications to give you the chance to look, book, and pay for any mobility option in your city. Public transit being that foundational core where we started our business and where we think we need to drive innovation as well. But the idea here is that in the future, you'll be able to access car share, ride for hire, taxi, bike share, and the like, all from one application. Now we're taking that a step further and we're actually introducing a new service called Movil On Demand. And as part of this, we're introducing microtransit, basically vans that can go and pool you with multiple customers going from point A to point B. And the idea here is that we want public transit, again, to be that core of a city's ecosystem for mobility. But what happens for the people who commute and get off at the end of the line? How do they get home from that destination, the so-called last mile? Or what happens to the bar crowd after the metro shuts down? Is there an opportunity to bring them home? Or what about the person who needs to go to dialysis every month? Or the wheelchair accessible vehicle that can pick up disabled passengers and make sure they have an opportunity to get to their destination? This is the beauty of microtransit. And we've introduced this in a way so that we're actually partnering with cities to say, what are the routes that are underserved? Where are the areas where there's a transit desert that we can help build that? And so what we have done is created a value proposition that has three key stakeholders: the city, the user, and the public transit authority. And there are many companies out there today who really seek to supplant or displace public transportation. That's not us. We think that public transit should be reinforced and powered by innovative technology, but will always play a central role in how we innovate in mobility. So, we've rolled this out in Germany in 2 cities so far, Stuttgart and Karlsruhe. But Movil On Demand is coming for its first US launch this year in Los Angeles. So that's pretty exciting. The question is, do you want it here in Portland? Okay. All right, so we'll talk about that. Now, here you are listening to someone who represents a private company who's putting forward this idea about innovation and whose title is a Mobility Bill of Rights. How is this possible? Well, let's face it, Movil and Daimler are but one of multiple players in this ecosystem who are moving like crazy with new technologies, new innovations, new ideas, new business models. It's nuts. If you have an RSS feed that says mobility, it's going to blow your mind. Everything is changing quickly. And that's why I submit to you, we need a Bill of Rights that will govern how we innovate, how we change, and make sure we protect our vision for a good society. So let me share that with you. Again, is transit actually just another mobility service provider? Or is it this foundational core, this connective backbone to different mobility? Last year, 41 of 44 US cities saw a precipitous decline in public transit use. People are riding public transit less. And why is that? We have aging infrastructure, we have unfunded infrastructure, we also have cannibalistic tendencies from the rideshare companies, from new mobility providers, and this is an issue. So we need to talk this through. What about paying for convenience? Should you be able to pay for a ride door to door at any time you want, no matter what you want? God willing, yes. But do we do so in such a way that we forego sustainability and support? So the idea here is, can you balance both convenience and sustainability? What about paying for things? Most of us have smartphones, and yet there's a very finite subset of underbanked or unbanked members of our community who rely on cash, who don't have access to traditional financial services. How do we account for them? So when it comes to our Mobility Bill of Rights, we believe that there are key things within environmental and social equity that need to be protected and paramount to our vision. Public transit is the core and needs to remain in public hands. No turning this over or privatizing it to a rideshare company. Convenience cannot win the day if it compromises sustainability. We have to balance both measures. We also have to track and reward the systems that deliver the most people the most efficiently. We need to build in accessibility and fairness, not just to the technology, but to our values as a society. How do we make sure people can get around and we take care of them? And finally, we need to actually walk. Can you imagine? Yeah, I go to Germany every quarter. People will walk 10 minutes to get to a train. Here, the idea that you have to be picked up, that you can't walk at all, I think we need to challenge because it can make healthier people and healthier cities. So next, what do we do with the city itself? What is the city's role in all of this mobility? Are they a stakeholder and a participant, or do they drive the innovation? We believe that cities can build a marketplace for multiple private players to compete, to offer innovation, but if they don't, we stand to be served by single, large, monopolistic companies, and we have to be careful. So from a transportation and smart cities perspective, we need to marry up urban development and city growth with actual transportation and growth there. So those have to be planned together. Urban mobility also has to account for how do you get from city to city. What about people who live in rural areas? How do we account for them and make sure they have access to our service? And finally, thoughtful transit-oriented development is the way to go. It is absolutely the way to go because we want to build communities that are sustainable, that are walkable, and that really share that vision. Next, do you want 12 apps on your phone to choose between 12 different mobility providers, or do you want the convenience of a single account, single payment, your data to look at in one experience? It's a key question. And what about the data? Who do you trust more to protect your data? This is maybe a false question or a false choice. Do you want a private corporate interest, Facebook? Do you want the government, NSA? I don't know, I'm going off track. But the point is the data that you provide is the currency of the future. And you need to have rights around your own data. Finally, does your city really support this notion of an open or a closed approach to technology? Do they rely on proprietary closed-loop systems, or do they insist on open APIs, services that are open for multiple developers to contribute to and maintain? So, from an innovation perspective, the way that cities do business has to change. The anachronistic procurement program, RFPs, actually doesn't drive the innovation that we need. We need more public-private partnerships, we need more pilots, and we need to adjust the way that we procure business so that startups can participate. We also need to make sure that all of your data is protected, but you should also be willing to give a certain portion of your data back to city planners to improve service and build that city we want. So the Transit Bill of Rights, or the Mobility Bill of Rights, really is about capturing the public interest while allowing the space for innovation. It's about a shared vision for what we want to do. We have to honor it, we have to speak to it, we have to insist on it. And it won't simply be a bunch of white guys in wigs. It's going to be everyone here. And we all need to participate in that revolution. We need to be part of the solution, and we're asking that you join us to be part of the movement at Movil. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. We are really fortunate to have Nat here. For those of you who don't know, he's arguably one of the leading entrepreneurs in the city of Portland, built a company literally from scratch. I know you enough to know that you really do have sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. You've got an interesting background, sort of less typical than you might think. You worked for Osberg for a while. Your company got bought by Daimler. Huge company, right? My guess is a slightly different corporate culture. So I think the question is, for anybody who is an entrepreneur and thinking of starting up a company and hoping to have as successful an exit as you did, how does that feel? How do you, I know you don't run your company at Daimler's headquarters, you have separate offices, but how does that dynamic work?
It works really well, surprisingly. I think the mentality of an entrepreneur and a startup person is, I want to build towards an exit, right? So you're constantly thinking, how do I build this? How do I have an event where I can have the innovation, have the resource, and have this outcome that I so desire? But when it comes, some fear, then I lose control. What do I do? And so I think finding alignment vis-a-vis the values and the vision of your potential acquirer is really important. I was shocked that the inventor of the automobile would be willing to invest in public transit innovation. I would never have thought that Daimler would be the acquirer of Globe Sherpa. But what I found is that Daimler is extremely progressive, and they are smart enough to know we have to leave them enough room to run. Otherwise, we'll strangle them. And that's a key, I'd say it's a theme I see with other entrepreneurs. How do you actually build the independence to have the runway, to take risk, to fail, to move quickly? We've been fortunate in that regard, so I feel pretty lucky.
So I read a story, I can't remember where, about you and about Daimler, and I think the story started by saying that Daimler, more than any other company in this space, is preparing for the end or the demise of car ownership, which is in part what you're talking about. Is that true?
In many respects, it is. So if you look at Daimler's financials, we had the most profitable year ever last year. We became the #1 luxury car maker in the world. But it is at the height of the empire when you have the highest vantage point to look beyond the horizon. And to Daimler's credit, the senior management team is saying, we have to transform. We cannot just be an OEM. We can't just manufacture vehicles and become the next Nokia, the next Kodak. We have to be a mobility company, a true tech company. And I think that's why they partner with companies like Movil, teams like mine, who can really challenge the mindset, the culture, and the innovation that's going on.
So one of the things that you do is you travel the world, and I assume you're the #1 salesman for your company, and you convince transit agencies that they ought to employ you in your app. But in order to do so, you have to convince these transit agencies that you need to kind of get in bed with the Ubers of the world. I would imagine that that's a bit of a tough sell.
You'd be surprised. First of all, we don't come in and say, this is Movil, this is our private label app, you can only use this. We build white label applications, meaning we partner with a city. So anyone who's used TriMet Tickets, the TriMet Tickets app, it's powered by Movil. It's like the Intel Inside analogy. So we want to be kind of that operating system for urban mobility, but we want to promote and support the brands of our city partners and public transit agency partners. As to including Uber, Lyft, Car2Go, and others, it's their choice. We're there to provide the technology and the capability to do so, but the business rules, the terms to do it, are based on the agency and what they want to do. We're going to provide the data, we're going to provide security, we're going to provide the payment, And we're going to provide a tool that really connects them to their end user, and they desperately need this. So we think it's better to have that as an aggregation platform where you have multiple modes where users can choose what they want the most. But ultimately, we're there to enable, not to dictate.
So, and just a reminder, we're going to have time for questions, so if you want to ask, come to either of those mics. Wanted to ask you about autonomous vehicles. You know, the death in Arizona has been in the news. I guess my question is, something like 37,000 Americans died in 2016. I don't think they have the data yet for 2017 from car accidents. So if we move to autonomous vehicles and 15,000 people die, it'll be a huge improvement. And yet, one person died last month, and it has sort of put a lot of the autonomous vehicle design and development on hold. There seems to be sort of almost an emotional block that at least Americans have to get past, which is to accept a certain number of fatalities that are caused by a computer error rather than an operator error. Is that going to take a lot longer than the technology itself for people to adapt to?
My thesis is actually no. And I base that on a highly anecdotal experience, my own, where I actually got to drive my boss's AMG, this autonomous, amazing sports car in Germany. And I was scared shitless, to be honest.
On the Autobahn?
On the Autobahn.
So you're
of course,
going
we were
like...
going very fast. He said, okay, Nat, take your hands off the wheel. I did. Kind of breathing heavy. Okay, take your foot off the pedal. I did. We're going straight, not a big deal. Well, then there's some S-curves that come up, and I literally go, no, don't touch the wheel. I'm going like this. He says, don't touch. Sure enough, the car tracks just fine. Well, then traffic stops pretty quickly. I see brake lights. I go, no, don't touch. The car brakes, and we get into near stop-and-go traffic, and the car can keep pace with the car in front of it. 10 minutes after I was scared, I'm sitting there texting, I'm talking to him, I'm looking out the window everywhere. It didn't matter. I couldn't believe how quickly I got comfortable. Now that being said, that was just me, and that's my anecdote. We have a responsibility to fully test, to fully vet, and make sure that autonomous vehicles live up to the promise of safe transportation. And it's going to take additional work. We use LiDAR, we use radar, we use cameras and sensors, but the unforeseen, the fruit that falls off the back of the pickup truck, the baby carriage that may be in the street is different for a computer to recognize than simply the traffic light or the stop sign. So we are innovating, we're going after it, but my view personally is that gathering the free time that you will, because you'll have so much more, I think it'll pay dividends, and I think people will become comfortable with the technology.
And people will adjust. Well, so along those lines, you talked about how in Germany, walking 10 minutes is not an issue. Here, it's somewhat of a challenge. So again, is this less of a technological hurdle as more of a cultural hurdle?
I think it's both. I mean, if you look at cities in Germany, they're typically smaller blocks, more pedestrian friendly. If you're walking 10 blocks in Houston, it's a completely different story. If you're trying to cross a street in Beijing, it's a completely different story. So how we build cities, how we plan our infrastructure matters. Getting people comfortable and asking the end user, do you like this? Would you use this? That's key. It's a big part of what we do. I think technologists run the risk of getting in their own heads too much, saying this is so cool, check this out, this is cool. Well, go test it with a real user. What do they say? Is it solving their pain? Are they asking for an innovation and a change? So we constantly have to drive our technology innovation with user-validated learning, and that's a big part of what we try and do at Movil.
So, big announcement, I think, last week. Daimler was, I think, creating a joint venture with bitter rival, BMW, to move into this space in terms of car sharing. What's behind that, and what role will you and your company play?
Sure. So last week, Daimler and BMW announced their intention to create a brand new mobility powerhouse, a 50-50 joint venture where they intend to merge all of their mobility businesses. So for Daimler, that comprises Movil, Car2Go, which is the largest free-floating car-sharing network in the world, and MyTaxi, which is the largest ride-for-hire network in the EU, where TNCs like Uber and Lyft are largely regulated out of existence. Taxi is sort of king. On the BMW side, you have Reach Now, Drive Now, Charge Now, and Park Now, which also owns Park Mobile, which is the largest pay-by-cell parking company. We're going to merge these businesses and create a new powerhouse that is meant to reorganize urban mobility. And Movil's role in this will be to continue pushing the boundaries of what multimodal transportation means. So we will play the role we play now, marrying up public transit with car sharing, with ride for hire, but now increasingly parking, charging when these electric and autonomous vehicles come forward. So it's a market play, it's scale, and it's a commitment to the future of taking on the biggest and the best.
And a number of analysts have suggested that this now puts you and BMW in perhaps the best position to challenge Uber.
I'm not authorized to give you an opinion on that.
All right. You, on your screen earlier, talked about the importance of cities supporting open technology. I should know this, but I don't. Does Portland?
Portland absolutely does. In fact, Portland and TriMet, largely by extension, have been pioneers in creating progressive technologies for transportation. Open APIs, services that can be shared and curated by the third-party development community. So, in fact, there's a panel just after this talk. Bibiana McHugh was really the architect around this notion of GTFS, General Transit Feed Specification, where any developer can build an app that says, when does my bus arrive? How do I get from point A to point B? And it's the same innovation that, I love the anecdote, the National Weather Service and NOAA employed. They had satellite data about weather, and they said, do we build the app, or should we just put the data out there and let third parties build the apps around it? And we've seen real innovation with that approach. So Portland is leading the way, but there are a lot of cities that need to follow suit.
All right. I think we have a question over here.
That's actually a perfect segue into my question, Nat. You know, obviously, one of the key premises of your talk is mobility over convenience. As a local of Portland, where do you see us moving, and where should we move, in your opinion, as somebody that lives and breathes this every day, in terms of infrastructural changes? Obviously, infrastructure can serve, especially in our case, as a great impetus for moving forward and driving innovation. You know, the fact that we have 2 bridges going into Washington, we have the MODA Center, we have the T-curves, you know, like all the things that we cry and complain about to ourselves on a weekly basis, you know, that's helping push, you know, mobility and push what you and what Movil are championing. Do you think that we should let those infrastructural hangups continue kind of being catalysts for change? Or are you still like, well, I grew up in Portland, this crap needs to change?
I actually grew up in Washington, D.C., and so riding a huge metro and growing up, to me, was how I fell in love with public transit. I was a latchkey kid, loved public transit for that reason. Portland has some serious challenges, which I think you've noted. The key issue here is you can't necessarily build your way out of congestion. You can't just add lanes to highways and expect that we're going to go faster. There's a concept called induced demand, which is the notion that people will drive more if they think there's more room on the road to do so. Fundamentally, what we need to do is encourage people to get out of one butt per car. We need to get more people using shared services, public transit, car sharing, and the like, but we also need the infrastructure to support it. Certainly, the bridge over the Columbia is an issue that's been challenging us. You look at the Tillicum Crossing as one of the most recent fantastic infrastructure developments, a transit-only bridge, and it's created enormous connectivity to the Southwest Corridor. Our investment in light rail has paid dividends not just in mobility, but in actual development of cities, real estate, and retail. So these are the types of things that we need to put our money where our mouth is. And we as private citizens, even if you don't ride the bus, you need to put your money into these kinds of infrastructure developments. It's the same reason that we also support education even if we don't have kids, because we all benefit from investing in these shared services. So yes, there are infrastructure challenges. We've seen places like Seattle and Houston. These are 2 of the exceptions, 2 cities that saw an increase in public transit because they invested, they created tax bonds and measures to do it, and they put transit first. So that's the goal. That's where we want to be.
Thanks. Thank you. And with that, we're out of time. Nat Parker, everybody.